Hey everyone, this is Nick for PokerVIP.com, otherwise known as Crazy Cookie on the PokerVIP forums. And today I'm starting a new series, which I've kind of been talking about quite a bit on the forums recently, which is learning to crush 15 minutes at a time. And the idea is simply to take 15 minutes out of your day and to maximize that 15 minutes and study some really good stuff. A lot of people are saying on the forums that they've got the time to study and they've got the motivation to study, but they have no idea what to do. They end up just watching videos, which can be useful, but not always. They kind of just look at their stats and they don't really know how to study. And as a result, they don't go anywhere. So today I'm going to address that problem. I'm going to sort of highlight some really simple things you can do in 15 minutes. And I'm going to go through each one and pretty much help you take 15 minutes out of your day to get better at poker. I'm going to sort of like have a look and see what we're going to look at in this series. So today I'm going to simply talk about how you can maximize this 15 minutes of study every single day. There's no point, studying for 15 minutes half-heartedly or watching a video whilst also on Facebook for 15 minutes. But that's really just the surface of it. There's a lot more detailed stuff I'm going to go into today on how to really maximize this 15 minutes that I'm kind of advertising as your study time. And then from the next episode onwards, I'm going to go through some different things you can do in 15 minutes to really improve your game. I won't go through all of them now because that would be a waste of time because we'll do that later on. You can look through this list though, and you can kind of begin to guess what we'll look at in future videos. But to start off with today, like I said, I'm going to look at how to maximize your 15 minutes. This you might think is a little bit of a boring video, and you're going to stop watching now. But honestly, this is probably the most valuable lesson on here, purely because it's going to really help you not just maximize how to use your 15 minutes. It's going to help you track your skills through a week or 2 or 3 weeks, so that you're not just learning how to do it, you're learning, then reviewing, and you get to a point where after maybe a month you maybe won't have mastered the skill, but you'll be able to accurately determine how close you are to having that skill at a really high level. So this is some really important stuff. I'll fly through it if I can, and hopefully you can gain something really valuable from this, even if you don't watch any of the other videos in the series. So first of all, when to use your 15 minutes, do not limit yourself if you don't want to. This is advertised as the 15-minute study session. The same things that I do for 15 minutes, I also do them for 30 minutes, for an hour, for 2 hours, and sometimes longer. There is no reason just to say I'm only going to do 15 minutes, but this is really highlighting that you can just study 15 minutes. For sure, use all of these techniques I'm showing you and use them for as long as you want. They're not limited to 15 minutes. Some good times to use your 15 minutes. Before sessions, what are the benefits of that? Well, it's great as part of a warm-up. I have quite a disciplined warm-up where, for 15 minutes of my allocated half hour or so, I am doing one of these sessions that I'm going to share with you. And it then leads really well into my session. I set it as a goal that in my session I'm focused on what I've just looked at, and it means that throughout my session, I'm very much aware of this new skill that I'm learning or a skill that I have learned, and it just means that you're going to play quite well if you're focusing on it. So it's a really good time to use it. Early mornings. I don't think that, poker players, whether they are part-time players, recreational players, or professional players, love the words early mornings. But we are most active when we first woken up. If you can get up half an hour earlier before you go to work or, before you normally get up, just to study for 15 minutes, you're going to gain massively from it. The way I always look at it is, if you do that, you're gaining 15 minutes of study on everybody else because no one else does it, or very, very few people do it. So if you're using that 15 minutes in the first half hour of your day, after, a week, you'll be 105 minutes ahead of everybody else in terms of studying. You know, it doesn't take too long before you're 5-10 hours ahead of people. And a lot of this content, if you spend 10 hours on it, you are on your way to having a very, very good understanding of it. And it will be really, they'll be just refreshing lessons. So, you know, use those early mornings, get up a little bit earlier if you want to, or, you know, stay up 15 minutes later. Either's fine, I suppose. The other cool thing with if you start in the early morning is you start off your day well, and if you then don't have time to study later on, you've already done it. There's no pressure. And let's face it, 15 minutes extra in bed has about zero effect on your day. I think you have to go up to like an hour before you actually have any meaningful impact on your day. So if you were to have 7 hours sleep or 7 hours and 45 minutes sleep, you're probably going to feel the same throughout the day. So, you know, just putting that out there. After sessions, this can also be quite good if you've had a rough session and you feel like you haven't played very well, or you feel like actually that part of my game that I've been working on was very poor. If you can address it straight away and you can jump in and you can go through whether it's c-betting or facing c-bets, as we're going to look at later on, or you know, or whichever one of these 15-minute skills we're going to look at. If you can address it straight away, the next session you play, you're going to have far less negative emotions. You're going to sort of like cut out this accumulation tilt which can happen. And accumulation tilt, for those of you who don't know, is pretty much when you have maybe 3 or 4 sessions where, you know, typically it's where you run bad, and then you go into the next session. As soon as you lose a flip or a cooler, you think the world is against you or whatever. In this instance, it can be simply that, you know, you tilt because you're not playing particularly great. You're playing very passively, or you're spewing around. And then the next session, as soon as you begin to do that, you straight away think you're just not going to play very well, and you slip straight into your B or C game. If you address the problem pretty quickly, the next session you're going to start, and you're going to be in a much better position mentally to start off with. So it can be good. I don't use it always after sessions. I've got something else we can do after sessions, which is just as valuable. And then finally, you can use them on their own. I mean, I do love them as warm-up exercises, but sometimes when they're a warm-up exercise, they can get a little bit, they begin to lose their meaning a little bit as study sessions, and you more use them as a way of just getting into playing. So, you know, setting aside 15 minutes, you know, it could be a case of the 15 minutes after dinner, you go and study, then you go and do something else, then you play. And I think that can be really valuable as well. Or if you just have 15 minutes before you have to go somewhere, and it's like a case of I've got 30 minutes to kill here. Let's do 15 minutes of studying. It all adds up, and that's the beauty of this. If you can use these 15 minutes effectively, they add up really, really quickly. I would stress this to be very important, and that's to focus on each one of these one at a time. Hopefully, some of you will come across these videos a few months after this series has started and will watch this and then be like, oh my God, I've got so many videos to choose from. I'm going to watch them all and implement them all. That will not work. You know, if they're all new skills to you, that will not work, because you will be trying to learn them all at the same time and just not retain that knowledge. So it's important to stay with one skill until you think you've got it to a very good level. So make sure you're consistent. Reinforce learning every day before every session. So, you know, if you've got a skill that you're learning and you can spend 15 minutes a day on it to really refine that skill, after probably 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to get to a stage where you're like, okay, I feel comfortable with this skill. And I'm going to talk about in a little bit how you can track to see where exactly that skill is. But I found with a lot of these, after doing it for about 3 weeks, you're in a really comfortable position. You're like, okay, I've been consistent with it every single day, and you know it, and you're applying it pretty much perfectly in game situations without having to think about it a load. That's where you want to be. That's the mastering kind of, like, it's not mastering, but it's quote unquote master the skill, is when you can do the skill without having to think about it too much, if at all. Trying to overload your brain with a lot of different things. What tends to happen is if you've got 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 new things you're trying to learn, when you're at the table, you have to now retrieve all of that information fairly frequently. And that's pretty hard to do when we're playing our absolute A game. You know, trying to retrieve more than 2 or 3 skills when we're playing our A game is difficult. So trying to do it with 5, 6 or more is going to be impossible. So the reason I say focus on one at a time, it's so that when you're playing your A game, you can be like, yeah, I get this, I'm doing it all the time. But when you're playing your B or your C game, you don't have to begin trying to retrieve loads and loads of information. It's so frustrating. And I'm sure all poker players or people just in life will be able to relate to this, where they've learned so much in such a short space of time. And when it comes to testing that knowledge, they can't retrieve all of it. They can only retrieve bits of it. It's so frustrating. And in poker, unfortunately, we often do this to a point where we've learned enough of the skill to understand it, maybe, but then we don't know how to apply it. And then you actually go off and do something quite bad. A lot of people, they'll watch a video, for example, they'll see someone do it, they won't understand it, they'll try and implement it just randomly, and they lose money and they spew money away because they don't understand how to use it. That's going to happen if you try to learn 10 things at once. So focus on one thing at a time and then move on once you feel you've got to a good level. Some will naturally link, and it's kind of good if you say, well, that one kind of links to the one I've just looked at. Learn them, don't learn them both at the same time, but learn one and then go into the next. And then you'll be in a situation where the second one is going to come a little bit quicker. And you'll see we do naturally link them up anyway. Tracking improvement. And I think this is probably going to be the most valuable slides in this session, in this video session thing. I don't know. And that's because we want to be able to see how quickly we can learn the skill at different levels if the skill is there, so that we can be able to move on to a new skill, be able to not worry about focusing as much on this skill, and just so that you build confidence. If you know that you've learned a skill to a really high level, you naturally become more confident, and when you become more confident in yourself, and you're going to be able to play at an ease, and when you're playing an ease, you'll be able to retrieve more information, and it all kind of like just comes full circle. So this is really valuable. Before every session, set a goal. So that will be, say we were looking at, what we're going to look at next time, which is playing sort of like a GTO approximate approach. If you set a goal before your session, so every time you're in a situation where, you're the PFR, and the flop comes down, whatever it comes down, and you think about your range and say, right, this part of my range I'm going to bet, and this part of my range I'm going to check because that's balanced. If you do that, then and then do it throughout your session, you're going to be able to see where you're at straight away. There will be a lot of people who will, learn the stuff, do the 15-minute session, and then won't be able to do any of it in game for a few days. And that's completely normal because when you're learning about it, there's no pressure. You can take all the time in the world. You can visualize your ranges easier. There's a ton of reasons why it's quite easy to study. In game, you can't necessarily visualize your range. You have 30 seconds to act, and maybe you're playing, stakes, or hopefully you're not playing stakes you're uncomfortable at, but there's money at stake for the first time, and there's the fear of getting it wrong and it actually costing you. So we want to be able to see how we're doing. So set a goal before every session that's linked to the studying. It doesn't have to be one of these, but I think it'd be valuable if it is. And then we're going to be able to track it throughout. And how are we going to track it throughout? We need to be asking ourselves questions which start out with, are you able to do it when you're playing? Like I said, for a lot of you, you won't be able to the first time, or you'll be able to do it to a very low level. That's fine. You've just learned a new skill. If you've taught somebody, I don't know, how to throw a ball for the first time, and then you throw them into the middle of a baseball or cricket or American football game, they're not going to be able to throw the perfect pass. Even if they've practiced it a few times, they're not going to be able to because they're under a huge amount of pressure. Someone's running at them. The ball's moving when it gets to them. It's not going to be in their hands perfectly. It's the same with poker. You've got a lot of different things to worry about which you didn't have to worry when studying. So if you can do it in game, that means you've already reached a better level than where you were at before. Next question is how much you need to think about it. If you need to think a lot about it, you haven't learnt it to a very high level, because you're having to really concentrate and think hard on it. It's not a bad thing, and that's going to be where a lot of people get to a lot of the time, and then they think they've learned it. That's the funny thing. If you're having to think loads and loads and then being able to do it, people think that they can do it. Well, sure, but as soon as one different variable comes at you, that could be the one variable that puts you off, and then you can't do it. So you need to be assessing how much you need to think about this skill before implementing it. And then, are there times you can't do it? Are there times when you maybe are playing just outside of your A game, so the sort of like the best part of your B game, but all of a sudden, just that one small move means that you can't implement this new skill? Or is it that when it gets down and you're playing your worst B game or your C game, or when you're tilted, or when, somebody shoves all in? What are the scenarios where you can't do it? And over time, you'll be able to see that, oh, when I tilt now, I'm still able to do that. A very simple example would be raising on the button. When we're first taught about raising on the button, if we just sort of like don't really know what hands to raise or whatever, we're taught to then raise a 50% range. We have to think about it to start off with, and then we do it, and then over time we get better and better at it. But to start off with, if we'd lost a load of money, we might slip back into the 20% opening range because we're not able to think about, we're not thinking straight. But after a couple of months, it doesn't matter whether you're tilted or playing your A game, you're still able to do those simple moves. That's when you've learned a skill to a really high level. And when you get to that sort of level with a skill, it means that, to be honest, you don't need to focus as much on it. You can refine it through time, you can review it, but you don't need to be actively learning it. And a really good way to track that kind of progress is through rating each session. Rate it on difficulty. The difficulty levels I use are 1 to 5, and they're in the Mental Game of Poker 2, which I definitely recommend. It's a great book to read. Difficulty 1 is pretty much when you're studying. There's no pressure. There's no money involved. Pretty easy, Difficulty 2 will be when you're playing lower stakes than you normally do, or when you're running really good at your normal stakes, when you're not playing as many tables as normal. So the element of money is there, but you're not put under as much pressure as you normally do, Level 3 would then be running normal at your normal stakes, playing your normal number of tables. So, for a 10NL regular, if you're playing 6 tables of 10NL and that's your normal setup, and you're not running awful, you're not running great, that'd be level 3. Level 4 is then when you begin taking shots, or when you're running bad at your own level. This is the level where typically you see people really, it's quite interesting that people go from their comfort zone from level 1 to 3 to completely out of their comfort zone in level 4. And that's because they've learned loads and loads and loads of skills up to level 3 difficulty, but they haven't learned them to a level 4 difficulty, which pretty much means that as soon as they take shots, or when they run bad, they can't access those skills, even when they're playing their A game, and it means that they become a very weak player compared to where they were at. And what our aim is to make sure that we don't begin assuming we've learned something until we can do it in level 4 and level 5 difficulty situations. Level 5 would be a situation where, it might be that if you're a tournament player, you're on the final table of a huge tournament with the TV cameras on you, and you're playing against Phil Ivey. It's the example they use in men's game poker. And I think that's fantastic. For cash game players, it may be that you're playing live in a much higher stake games because you can beat those games, but it's a little bit scary. Or maybe you've taken a shot and you're now 3 buy-ins deep, and you're 3 buy-ins deep with another player who's a regular at that stake. Those kind of situations, they don't come up very often, but if you will have skills which you can put in at level 5. If you can put in these skills in those level 5 situations, you have effectively mastered them. And we can tell that the best players in the world have mastered these situations because the likes of Phil Ivey, Tom Dwan, all of the top players who we, whether you see them on TV, whether you know them through, high stakes internet games. These guys will have perfected much of their game to a level 5 difficulty, and it means that when you see them with, no visible emotions, complete control, and make a gutsy play in a situation which we can't even dream about, that's because they've mastered their skill set to that level of difficulty. Not very many people do it, and not many people can do it, to be honest. And then finally, rate each session on your skill. I've got CI, CC, and UC, which will mean absolutely nothing to a lot of people. They stand for competent. No, they don't. They stand for conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. That's a bit of a mouthful. I should have just written it out. The idea being that at the conscious incompetent stage, you are very much aware that something isn't quite right, but you don't know the fix to it. If you've learned a new skill and then you're playing and you feel like you're in this sort of level, it means that you simply have began understanding about the subject, but you don't know how to implement it. You're in a situation you have no idea whether a board is good to bet on or check on, and that's okay. That's the first stage of learning, and everyone needs to go through that. Conscious competence is when you know how to do something, but you have to think about it quite hard. So that's kind of like your typical level 3. You're playing like your level 3 game, or level 3 difficulty rather, and you have to think about, oh, this is a good board to c-bet because this, and this, and then you do it. A lot of people, when they get to this level, again, they think that they've mastered it, and they really haven't. You've mastered it when you get to unconscious competence, which is pretty much when you don't even need to think about it. You bet instinctively in a situation where it's good to bet, and if someone asks you, either you're at a level where you can say, oh yeah, I did that because this and this and this, but I didn't need to think about it. Or sometimes you'll say, you know what, I don't even know. I know why I did that, but I can't explain it to you because it seems so basic and I can't put it into words. And that's the level that we're trying to reach with each one of these. So make sure that you take some time to track improvement through your sessions. Write down notes through your sessions and afterwards. This is really valuable and something that if you do, you will improve a lot quicker, and you'll be able to really see, you'll be able to see your improvement, and you'll be able to know when best to move up. Speaking of moving up or moving on to new skills, do not ignore the previous skill. A lot of people will assume that they've learnt it to sort of like a level 4 difficulty when in fact they haven't. So you still need to track your sessions and how you're performing. Still set it as a goal. If it's a case of think about board textures more often and how they affect our range and villain's range. Okay, have that as a skill that you are going to track throughout, and remind yourself throughout the session, am I thinking about that? Yes, I am. Perfect. I'm still doing it. No, I'm not. Okay, why am I not doing it? Maybe I need to have a refresh 15 minutes on it. Be very careful when you're running bad or tilting. Try, and this is hard, but try to watch out for if you can still do these skills. If you find that you're running bad, you're tilted, you're playing at higher stakes, pretty much in any of the level 4, level 5 situations, be very watchful and see if that previous skill that you'd learned, is it still there? Because if it is, you can be very proud of yourself. And if it isn't, then you can say, okay, I need to focus on those situations and see how long it can take me to get there. Until I get to a point where I can do that skill in those tough situations. So that's important. Finally, pick a similar skill to the one you just learned. You can link 2 of them. You'll see, in fact, you can see in this series that the first 2 we're going to look at are Combinator PFR GTO estimate exercise, and then Combinator PFR exploitative exercise. That is not me being lazy. That's me saying, if you first have a GTO estimate approach and you learn that for 10 days and you get okay at that, the next step would naturally to be take the same spots and see if you can then turn them into an exploitative spot. And you'll then be able to compare the 2. And you get to a point where the reason they link quite well is because you're already familiar with how your range reacts on a board. So it might be, on a very dry board when you've opened in mid position and the big blind is called. Because of your range advantage, you can be bluffing quite a lot And for that reason, your GTO approach might actually be that you're betting almost your entire range. That's already exploiting villain, but it may be that you get into situations where your theory approach isn't too dissimilar. There may also be situations where you find that on more dynamic boards where your GTO approach is to be like, oh, I'm going to be checking back this board a lot, and I'm only going to bet my value hands and my semi bluffs. And then you look to exploit villain, you can say, well, actually, I can get him to fold a little bit more than just if I bet those hands. So I'm actually going to include these extra hands as my bluffing hands as well. And with that sort of like evolution and that sort of step forward in thinking, you can then apply both. So linking two together is going to be really valuable. And you can see throughout, I've kind of got two back to back. They're all going to be, they all do link to each other in a way as well. Like the board texture stuff moving on from Combinator is also going to link to the other two. And then Poker Snowy, when we get into that, again, it links to what we've already done. So I'm trying to link them in the most logical way possible. It'd be silly starting out with Poker Snowy and then going to board texture and then Combinator. Because they do get progressively more, I wouldn't say complicated, but you need to be able to kind of do the first ones a little bit better. But yeah, so all that's left for me to say is good luck and enjoy this series. I'd love to hear feedback. You might have seen as well that I had a more question mark kind of lesson planned. That isn't a lesson or a video. That's, if you guys want more of this, then definitely let me know when we get towards the end of these first 6 or so videos that we've got going on. If you've got any areas which you say, I'm struggling with this part of my game, is there a 15-minute study session we can do for this? I'm sure that if I don't have one, I can experiment with a few and then do them. And if you have any ideas that you do yourself, 15-minute sort of study sessions, definitely share them with myself and with the rest of the people watching. We'd all benefit, I'm sure. Make sure not to completely disregard this video if you've got to the end. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something from it. And I'll see you in the first really study session video coming soon.